some of them tempted him and were destroyed as serpents. Verse 11, now all these things happened unto them for ensamples, but they're written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore, if we learn anything at all, we ought to learn this fact. Let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. That's what you see constantly in the Old Testament. It even gets worse. We get to the book of Judges, and it's just one judge right after another. I believe 15 of them. One judge right after another was raised up to help God's people, Israel, in the land of Canaan. And they became idolatrous. So God left them on their own. They fell to foreign nations. Then they came back and said, we have sinned greatly. That's why all this has befallen us. And they were right. And then God sent them a judge to help. I don't know if we're going to get that far in here or not, but anyway, another judge came on the scene, and he lasted 10 or 15 years maybe. And then they became wicked all over again. I mean, that nation of Israel had their ups and their downs. And that's why we're studying the Old Testament. The New Testament tells us to because of what we can learn. Okay, go with me then back to Genesis chapter 37. And we'll pick up the narrative regarding Joseph. Joseph had really made some enemies. He said things. If I were Joseph, I wouldn't have said it. But he said some things. First of all, that he knew would make Dad upset at the other brothers. And he told Dad what these evil things that were going on. Well, they didn't appreciate that. And then he started telling his brothers. They were really 10, well, really 9 of them. Benjamin was just a boy. I was thinking this morning, trying to figure it out. I would think if Benjamin were living today at the age that he was then, he would probably about be a first or a second grader, maybe 6 or 7 years of age. That's Benjamin, Joseph's brother. He was some 10 years older, 17. We'll learn in just a little bit. But here he was coming to his brothers and telling them about some dreams that he had had. And of course, they were interested. The Bible doesn't tell us that God sent these dreams, but probably he did. But even if he did, why did he go and tell his brothers if he knew it would make them extremely angry? It even upset his daddy Jacob. Well, what were those dreams all about? Go to Genesis 37, and starting in verse 3, Israel, who is Jacob, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. Now, beloved, that's not a good thing. To love one child more than you love the other children, it's going to eventually manifest itself. And when it does, it's going to cause some real feelings. In this case, animosity. But he went ahead and he told them his dreams. But Jacob also made Joseph a coat. It says a coat of many colors. Some of the versions say a long-sleeved coat. But anyway, this was a special coat that he made because he loved this boy. Verse 4, obviously it's going to happen. His brothers saw their father loved him more than he did them. Now what's that going to cause? Envy. And they hated him. And in fact, they had nothing good to say about him. They could not speak peaceably with him. This was on their mind then most of their awake time. Very upset were they. Verse 5, Joseph dreamed a dream. Again, as I said before, it had been better if he just kept his mouth shut. But he told it to his brothers, and they hated him all the more because of his dream. Genesis 37, verse 5. And then he said to them, listen, my brothers, this dream I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field. We're binding them up and going and bind up a bunch more. And then, so as we were doing that, verse 7 says, now this is a dream. My sheaf rose up, stood upright. Now obviously this didn't really happen. This was a dream. And he said, your sheaves bowed down to my sheaves. Now they're already angry with him because of the coat. But now he's telling them a dream that he had. His brothers said to him in verse 8, oh, you mean you're going to reign over us, huh? And so they hated him yet all the more for these dreams and the words. I don't know why the inspired writer separated them, but because of the content and the way that he said it, the words that he used. But he wasn't through. He dreamed yet another dream. I assume probably the next night or maybe a night or two later. But anyway, he dreamed another dream and he told it to his brothers. And he said, I dreamed another one. Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance or bowed down to worship me. And then he told his dad, Jacob, about it. Verse 10. He told it to his father and the other brothers. And his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream that you've dreamed? Are you saying that your mother and I... Now his mother was already... Sarah had already died at this point. But remember, this is a dream, so allow for that fact. But is that what the dream you're telling us? Your mother and I and all your brothers are bowing down to you? And his brethren envied him, says verse 11. But his father observed the saying. When I read that statement, I thought, jumping ahead, you know what's found over in the New Testament about Christ, Jesus Christ. He was about 12 years old, went with mom and dad to the temple, and stayed there, and they left, went on their way, I assume thinking that he was in the crowd with the rest of the family. But he wasn't. He was back in Jerusalem talking with the Jewish law keepers, the scribes, and the Pharisees at the temple, asking them questions, befuddling them. They wondered what kind of person is this 12-year-old boy? asking such learned questions? Well, his mother came to him after they found out about it, and they had to go back to Jerusalem, and then scolding him, perhaps to a slight degree. Son, you know we've been concerned about you. And he made this statement: don't you know, wist you not, that I must be about my Father's business? And then the statement's made regarding his mother, Mary. Mary pondered these sayings in her heart. Well, I guess she did. What's he getting at here? His Father's business. Well, that's similar to the statement that we have here. His father, Jacob, verse 11, observed the saying that Joseph made, wondering what it meant. Okay, now the story or the plot thickens. Verse 12. His brothers went to feed their father's flock at Shechem. Now that's about 50 miles north. They had been at Shechem, and the two brothers, number 2 and number 3 sons, had really caused some problems because they said these Shechemites had really they have insulted us. They've taken our sister Dinah, one of them, who was the leader of the Shechemites at that time in that particular city, Shechem. He had taken and sexually assaulted Dinah. And so they decided they were going to get even. And they came up with this plan, whereby, I'm not going to rehash the whole story, but it all boils down to the fact that on the 3rd day after they had been circumcised, all of the men of the city, they were extremely sore. Then these 2 boys of Jacob's, brothers to Joseph, they had gone in and from house to house began to kill the Shechemites. You're not going to treat our sister this way. So evidently they thought, well, we've got reason to take out our revenge on these people. And since the men were in no shape to fight a war or a battle, they just killed all of them. And then Dad found out about it, Jacob did, and said, what have you done? You have made me to stink before all the people of Shechem. Now we're going to have to leave. And God says to Jacob, go ahead and leave. And so they left Shechem and came down to Hebron, 50 miles south. They had already been there, but they came down to Hebron. Well, that's where we are in chapter 37. And notice verse 12 says that Joseph's brothers went to feed the flock which was back in Shechem. They took their flocks to Shechem, right back where they came from. After some time had elapsed, I assume, enough time for them to maybe let some of their hot anger cool off. But they had the flock there back in Shechem. Verse 13, Jacob, or Israel, said to Joseph, aren't your brothers up in Shechem? Come, and I'm going to send you up to where they are so you can find out how they're doing. It's been a long time since I've heard from them. You became worried about them. So he says in verse 14, go and see whether things are going well with your brothers and with our flocks, and then come back home and tell me what you've learned about how things are going. So he sent him out of Hebron, and he came north to Shechem, about 50 miles. Now, notice it doesn't tell us about these time periods. I tried with the best of my ability to come up, but there's some time elapsing here. I mean, how do you go 50 miles when you don't have a car? Even with a car, it's going to take you an hour. But in that day, a day's journey is about 20 to 25 miles walking. This was 50. This is going to take at least 2 days. I would say probably more than 2 days, because you've got flocks that you're moving with you. You can't push them as fast as you could go yourself without the flock. So maybe 3 or 4 days transpire. And Joseph is coming to his brothers to find out how they're doing. Okay, he gets into town, into Shechem, verse 15, and a certain man found him. And behold, Joseph was wandering in the field. He was just wandering around. Evidently, by the way that it reads, I would assume that this man had been watching him and figured out this guy doesn't know where things are, or he doesn't know what's going on. And so he comes up to him and he says, young man, what are you looking for? Verse 15. And he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Verse 16. Tell me, where is it they're feeding their flocks? And the man said, oh, they left. I heard them say, he overheard their talking, and he said, I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. And Dothan is going to be a few miles on further. And so Joseph went north even further to find his brothers and found them there in Dothan. Verse 18 is where we're picking up today. I said all that to get us to this point. Here he's been to Dothan, and now, seeing how his brothers are doing, he's coming back to the brothers. Dad's still down in Hebron. In verse 19, they said to one another, look at this comment. Behold, the dreamer cometh. The dreamer is coming. You could almost taste the insulting attitude back of those words. This is Joseph, their brother. They didn't like him. They resented him. They didn't like that coat that was given. That stood as the epitome of their hatred. Dad gave him this coat and didn't give us one. So now here he comes, Joseph. But they didn't call him Joseph. Said, here comes the dreamer. Here comes the specialist in dreams. I don't know how you could make it any more insulting than that. You could get a little glimpse of their resentment in that one statement. So, probably they thought, when they said the dreamer, maybe they thought to themselves, he's really good for nothing else but dreaming. But anyway, he's walking toward them. And here he was giving them their opportunity. They could kill him. They could throw him in a pit, one of those empty cisterns that they found. There were two that they had gone by. They knew were, at least they knew one of them was empty. Maybe both of them were. But now they can do this, have him killed, and then report back to the father, Jacob, that the wild animal has killed him. Verbally, that's what they were going to tell him, a lie. Didn't have to come to that, as we'll see in just a moment, but they didn't orally, in so many words, tell that lie. That plan that they had to get rid of him probably was hatched up by the younger brothers. Probably Simeon and Levi, the two that caused all the problems at Shechem, probably was supported by them, but it was probably hatched up by the younger brothers, primarily of Bilhah and Zilpah's two handmaid children. But notice what the Bible says, verse 20. We are going to say, they already planned out what they were going to say to Daddy. Some evil beast has devoured him. And then we'll see what becomes of this smart Aleck's dreaming. Well, Reuben, the oldest boy, overheard what was being plotted. He did not go along with it, neither did Judah, the fourth down the line. But the oldest child was Reuben, and he was trying to deliver the boy out of the hands of these younger brothers who wanted him dead. And he says, let's not kill him. And Reuben said, shed no blood. Now, Simeon and Levi may have, they're the two sons, number 2 and 3. They're the ones that caused all this problem up here of the Shechemite people, the men in the city of Shechem being killed. And maybe they thought we had reason to do it. But they have absolutely no valid reason for killing their own brother Joseph. I think all of them knew what God had said much earlier back in the book of Genesis, that the one that sheds innocent blood, his blood is going to be shed. Probably Reuben was aware of that, I'm guessing. Anyway, he said, let's don't kill him. No justification here for shedding his blood, even though he was so obnoxious to his own brothers. Relating to them, maybe as he proudly wore the coat that Daddy gave him, relating all these dreams to them, which made them even more angry. So he appeared to be obnoxious in their eyes. But Reuben was trying to save him, the oldest boy. And bless his heart, as I said last week, knowing this was going to happen, you got to give Reuben some credit. The man lived an adulterous life. You can read about Bilhah later. But now he's standing up and being counted, doing something right. I think it's probably obvious, again I use the word probably, that Joseph realized that Reuben was trying to save him. Wouldn't you think so? Probably he realized Reuben is working in my behalf. Maybe, that means the same thing as probably. Maybe Reuben had actually whispered something like this: after they throw you into the pit, I'll come back and get you later. Maybe. At least that was his intent. See verse 22. Don't shed blood. Let's throw him into the pit, or this cistern that's dry now, and don't lay a hand on him, in order that he, Reuben, might rid him out of their hands, his brother's hands. He wanted to deliver him. He was going to come back later, get Joseph, and take him home to Jacob. That's Reuben's plan. So bless his heart, he's trying. And he is doing a better job of living than he had it in the recent past. And it came to pass, says verse 23, when Joseph was come to his brothers, notice the first thing they did. They went to that coat. That was the very thing that stood out as an emblem of their anger. They went for that coat. They stripped him of his coat, the coat of many colors that was on him. And then they took him without the coat. They took him and cast him into a pit. It was empty. No water was in it. But it served the purpose. It got him out of their minds for a while. Now notice verse 25 says, well, 24, they took him, they cast him into a pit. They, verse 25, they sat down to eat bread. I had a little problem there. I keep trying to put myself into their shoes. But they sat down. I mean, they could, maybe some of them were close enough to that cistern, they could look down in there and see, and I know they could hear him, so we'll have more on that in just a little bit. But they sat down and had a meal while their brother was down here in the pit. I hope, probably, I would have hoped that it would have given him a stomach ache. But what can we learn from all of this? Well, we can learn how not to treat your brethren even though he's a bit obnoxious. It came to pass, this is evidently shortly, came to pass, Joseph came to his brothers, they did all of this to him, and they sat down to eat, verse 25, and maybe they've taken just a very few bites. They lifted up their eyes, and what did they see but a company of Ishmaelites coming with their camels, headed to Egypt on a business trip. They were, look at what they had with them. Items of trading. They were going to trade spices and balm and myrrh, carry it down to Egypt. So this was, as far as they were concerned, a business trip. Okay, now in verse 25, they sat down to eat bread. By this time, it's not, of course, Benjamin's back home, so that would be 11. But Joseph was in the pit, so that's 10. But Reuben was not even there, so it's the 9. The 9 boys were eating right up close to this pit, evidently. And Reuben was gone. I say that because look at verse 29. Reuben returned. That tells me that he was away. I don't know how long he had been away, but I don't know why he left. But Reuben had been away, and he came back to the pit, and Joseph was not there, and it shocked him. He didn't know all this part was going on, so I read myself a note. Reuben was gone by now. See verse 29. So Reuben's gone. He sees, and immediately when he sees that pit is empty and Joseph was gone, I can imagine his stomach turned. I imagine he was extremely upset. After all, he's the oldest child. Dad's going to hold him responsible. That's going to be the first question. Where's Joseph? And so, what's going on in his mind? We'll read verse 30. He turned to his brothers and he said, the child, our younger brother, Joseph, is not there. What am I going to do? He was wringing his hands. Well, really, verse 29 says he rent his clothes, which is a normal expression back in those days. To show you're extremely upset, you just take and rip your shirt. I guess like Hulk Hogan, pull that shirt off and rip it. You rip your shirt, rip your clothing. You're in a deep case of being upset and concerned. So they sat down to eat, and then they saw these Ishmaelites and said, well, let's get rid of him this way. It was Judah. Now, I said a moment ago, Reuben wasn't for doing this, killing him. Judah was not for killing him. Judah comes up, bless his heart, son number 4 in aging group. Judah said to his brothers, what's it going to profit us if we slay his brother and try to hide his blood? How's that going to help the situation as far as we're concerned? Wouldn't we be better off if we sold him as a slave